You're listening to the Chronicles of Aguna, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.
Hello and welcome back to the Chronicles of Aguna, the Arsenal podcast, brought to you by 90 Min. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Symeou, and it's our Euro 2020 show. Happy Sunday, good morning, hope you're all well, hope you all enjoyed the football last night. I'm sure if you're based here in the UK, you did. Fantastic performance from England, really professional performance, and I wasn't convinced earlier on in the tournament. I wasn't convinced before the tournament. I'm still not 100% convinced, but you've got to say, it's got a pretty bloody good chance of coming home, hasn't it? Because England are looking really, really strong. It looks like they're peaking now, which is, you know, something that I think is important in international football, particularly at tournaments. I mean, we look at some nations and we look at the way they've kind of done it in years gone by, and they've kind of sort of been slow burners and kind of got to their kind of peak point just at the right time, and that's seen them get over the line. I think with England, there's no getting away from the fact that they did start the tournament poorly. You know, the performance against Croatia, in my opinion, wasn't very good. They came up against a really poor Croatian side on the day and, you know, had their moment, took their moment and won the game. Obviously, people were pleased with the result, as they should be, and they moved forward. And then people kind of from then were like, well, you know, we exercised the demons of Croatia from the last World Cup, so you know, we're on a great track. And then the Scotland game came, and then everybody kind of went the opposite, where they were saying, well, no, this team is definitely, absolutely, categorically 100% not good enough to go all the way in this competition. You know, people were talking about Gareth Southgate and how he should be sacked at the earliest opportunity. Then came the game against the Czech Republic, another victory, but not necessarily an overly convincing one. Knockout stages of the competition. You know, England with a 1-0 win over Germany, another old enemy, another side who historically had gotten the better of England. And then from then on, the draw has really, really benefited England. But, you know, they've still got to make it count. They've still got to beat what's in front of them. And they're playing against opponents, in my opinion, that are not necessarily world beaters, but what you would class as tricky opposition. And actually, traditionally, in years gone by, you know, England have struggled with this type of opposition. The opposition who are, if they're at their top level, they are capable of causing you problems. An opposition in which you need to kind of find that right balance between believing in what you're doing, but also showing them the respect that they deserve. And I think England have learned in that sense. I think England have come a long way in that sense. I think Gareth Southgate deserves a lot of credit in that sense, because, you know, everybody was kind of sitting there going, England are definitely going to win this. England are definitely going to cruise through. England are, you know, certainly going to, you know, book their place in the semi-final. But there was always this thing about, you know, everybody kind of suggesting that England should just go out there and play this really open and expansive football and you know, just make a number of changes. And no, that was the completely wrong approach. And Gareth Southgate proved that again, made just a couple of changes to the side that played against Ukraine. Jadon Sancho, of course, coming in, you know, and making sure that he was sort of part of it. And then, of course, you know, Trippier missing out as well. He needed to make a couple of changes to keep things fresh. Obviously, went back to the system of the kind of sort of 4-2-3-1 sort of thing, which worked brilliantly. And England got off to the perfect start, didn't they, with that early goal. You know, you couldn't have asked for a better start. Really good work again from Raheem Sterling, you know, to open up that Ukraine defense with a really clever pass, I thought, into the half space. And look, Harry Kane's had an awful tournament. And, well, up until yesterday, he's had a really poor tournament, really ineffective tournament. He's not hit the high standards that, he set himself. The thing is, when I looked at that finish again for England's first goal, he does sort of get slipped in, and then he kind of has a little bit of a stab at it, a little bit of a snatch at it, and he hits it actually into the goalkeeper, and it comes off of the goalkeeper and goes in the back of the net. And that was the little bit of the rub of the green that Harry Kane desperately needed, because, as I say, his form has been poor. He's been a shadow of the player that we've seen he can be in the Premier League over the years. And that was a really big moment for England, because it felt after that goal went in that Harry Kane had turned up to the party. And that's massive, because, we talk a lot about sort of the talent that Gareth Southgate and England have at their disposal, and there is plenty of it. But Harry Kane in particular is one of those players that if he's at his best, you always stand a chance against anybody. Now, some of you will wonder why in the thumbnail for this podcast, I've put a picture of Jordan Henderson. Well, the reason I've put the picture of Jordan Henderson, even though his goal was not the most important or the catalyst for England's victory yesterday, I couldn't bring myself to put a picture of bloody Harry Kane on an Arsenal podcast. So Jordan Henderson, it is not that that's much better, but it's a bit better. So yeah, really, really professional display from England, and they deserve a lot of praise and a lot of credit, showing their ability in aerial situations, which was key during their World Cup semi-final run. And it was something that we'd looked at in this tournament so far and gone, well, where's it gone? Where is it? That is one of England's biggest weapons, and it felt like they weren't utilizing that. But obviously that improved yesterday. That all sort of clicked into place. What I will say, though, is where England are different to me than where they have been in years gone by is that maturity, and is that understanding of the fact that regardless of the noise that comes from the fans, they can't be on the front foot in every single moment of every single game. They have to manage games smartly. Tactically, I've always felt England have lacked in comparison to some of the other big footballing nations, because I felt like they've always gone gung-ho. They've always been a little bit naive in certain situations. But I was really impressed to see them kind of, having scored that first goal against Ukraine yesterday, recognize that, yeah, this is not the greatest Ukraine side in the world. It's not the greatest opponent in the world. However, it is a team that are capable of causing problems. Yaremchuk, Yarmolenko, Shaparenko, all players, in my opinion, who are very capable of causing you problems. And England dropped off a little bit. Ukraine started to get a hold of the ball, started to move the ball around, I thought, quite well. Had a couple of half chances, got in behind on England's right-hand side a couple of times. But England managed it really, really well. And, you start the first half with a goal, you start the second half with a goal, and all that kind of momentum that Ukraine had built up at the end of the first half, where they were actually playing quite well. And then they go in the dressing room, and you can imagine, you can just picture Andrei Shevchenko and the senior players in there, really rallying and really sort of getting behind one another and talking about how important it was for Ukraine, to come out and continue in the vein at which they just finished the first half, and bang, goal goes in straight after the break. And from then on, that was it. I think I've talked a lot about mentality. I've talked a lot about maturity. I've talked a lot about sort of tactical nous and sort of not falling into those traps that England have fallen into for many, many years. And Gareth Southgate deserves a hell of a lot of praise for that. He's been mocked. He's been called negative. He's been called boring. He's been called every name under the sun. But the reality is that Gareth Southgate recognizes where England are, recognizes that while this is a very talented group, and I'm not denying that for a second, there are a lot of players in there who are overblown because they are Premier League players, in my opinion. There are a lot of players in there who the rest of Europe won't necessarily look at and say, yeah, he's a top player. But because we kind of view these players with that Premier League lens week in, week out, we sometimes fall into that trap. Gareth Southgate's recognised that. He knows where his team is strong. He knows where his team are probably lacking. And he's found a way of managing things almost immaculately. Now, is it the most thrilling football you'll see? No, it's not. But who cares? Because if the result is there, that is all that matters. And that is what Gareth Southgate's going to be judged on at the end of his England tenure. Could he guide England to a major tournament? And even if England don't go on to win the European Championships, which they stand a really bloody good chance of doing now, but even if they don't, 2 semi-finals in consecutive tournaments is progress for England. And there is this snobbery in England, right, where we look at the football team and we go, well, they should absolutely be capable of winning every single international tournament and every single international competition. That inevitably doesn't happen. And then the meltdown begins. England are crap. Gareth Southgate's crap. This player's crap. This player's overrated, etc., etc. No, this is a nation that hasn't won a major footballing tournament since 1966. 1966. Let that sink in. My dad, I'm a grown-ass man, and my dad was 2 years old the last time England won a major tournament. So that England have no right to win these tournaments. England have no divine right to be one of the elite in world football. But I tell you something, 2 semi-finals in consecutive competitions is a step in the right direction, even if it doesn't end up with the all-glorious sort of trophy lift at the end. Gareth Southgate has taken this team forward, because you look at that squad, and I know, it's a very talented one, and people were talking about that going into the tournament, but I'd still argue it's not as good as the squads that had midfields of Beckham, Scholes, Lampard, Gerrard, peak Michael Owen up front, Sol Campbell at the back alongside Rio Ferdinand or John Terry, Ashley Cole, probably the best left back this country's ever seen, playing at left back. This side is not as good as that side, yet this side is functional, and this side is working because he's found a way of making this group of players cohesive with one another. He's found a way of setting the right tone within the camp. And whatever happens from here and now on, I think Gareth Southgate has done a fantastic job and deserves a lot of credit. I really do. And I wasn't always convinced about Gareth Southgate. I needed convincing. What I think he's done, which is kind of, I guess it's not completely eradicated it, but it has kind of lessened that negative sort of vibe that normally follows the England team around. He's made the whole thing and the whole camp and the group and himself very approachable and very likable and very down to earth, and people buy into that. And all of a sudden, there are people who will always support England no matter what, but those people who are maybe a little bit sort of cynical, who are waiting for them to fail at every opportunity, are now on England's side and are behind them and are supporting them and are backing them. And that makes the world of difference when you're talking about the atmosphere around the camp, the atmosphere around the country. All of that filters through to the players. And Gareth Southgate is not just managing football matches really well at the minute, but he's also managing the media, he's managing the fans, he's managing the expectation. I think he's doing a really fantastic job. And look, with Denmark to come in the semi-finals, I think, again, Denmark fall into that category of an opponent that England should, in theory, have enough to beat. But they're also a dangerous opponent. I think you can't disrespect them. And in years gone by, I'd have looked at England and gone, they're arrogant, they're naive, they will underestimate someone along the line who will come to bite them in the arse, who will punish them. But I don't feel that way now. I don't look at Gareth Southgate's England and see those same issues. I think that they are a lot more respectful of their opponent. I think they're a lot more clued up on their opponents. And I think they recognize more than ever that they have no divine right to win these competitions. And so they must be professional, and they must be smart, and they must be humble in the way they go about their work. And off the back of that, you're seeing some brilliant results. You're seeing some brilliant scenes. And it's great. I mean, look at sort of yesterday. I know England were sort of in dreamland pretty early on in the game. They obviously took the lead after 4 minutes, scored on the 50th minute. Scored on the 46th minute, so just a minute after half time, and then added a third on the 50th minute. So essentially, they had 40 minutes to just stroll around, kind of be professional, but to kind of just take their foot off the gas a little bit. And they were able to make 5 changes. Shaw got a rest. Phillips got taken off. Rice got taken off. Sterling got a bit of a breather. Harry Kane got a breather as well. There's a few players I want to shout out because, we've got the other quarterfinals to talk about briefly as well. So I want to make sure we got time for that as well. But just a few players that I think deserve shout outs. I think Harry Maguire has made a big difference to England. And, in the past, I've called him a fridge. And I still think he looks like a fridge for what it's worth. But I think, I don't know if Harry Maguire is that good. No, I know he's not that good. I just think Harry Maguire is so much better than every other England centre-back, barring John Stones. I think when you look at the alternative options, you look at people like Tyrone Mings, Connor Cody. I just think that Harry Maguire is at a much better level than those guys. And that has shown since he's come back into the team. I think he's a lot better in terms of progressing the ball out of the defence than people give him credit for as well. And I always think that, and I used to say this a lot about David Beckham after he left Manchester United when he was playing for Real Madrid. When you take that sort of Arsenal fan lens off and you're not looking at a rival player because you're watching them in a different environment, I think it's easier to sort of be fair in your assessment and fair in your judgment of these players. And I can say that watching Maguire now, and maybe I couldn't say that when I was watching him in a Man United shirt. I don't know. Luke Shaw, another one, absolutely fantastic. Not just incredibly solid defensively, incredibly sort of energetic and industrious in all the work he does down the left-hand side, but puts pinpoint deliveries into the penalty area. And I think it's fair to say he was probably the best left back in the Premier League last season. And, when you think about all that was being said about Luke Shaw, a couple of years ago, 18 months ago, he's proved people wrong. And that's always a great story to see. Moving a little bit sort of further forward, Raheem Sterling, again, question marks around whether he should have been in the side at the start of the tournament, has proved every single doubter wrong. And fair play to Raheem Sterling, because people will say maybe he should pass the ball a little bit more. And there are things in his game that he could improve on. There's no doubt about that. But he's made the difference in every single game so far, barring the Scotland game. Every time England have won a match, he has been the catalyst for that. He has been the spark. He has been the one that unlocked a stubborn defence, that opened the floodgates by playing Harry Kane in yesterday. So he has just done so much at this tournament. And, yes, there are players like Sancho and Foden and Grealish who everybody would like to see in the starting lineup, but you cannot at this moment in time drop Raheem Sterling. It just wouldn't be right. I want to just quickly mention Sancho as well, because I got an opportunity yesterday, obviously, and I thought what was best about Sancho was a couple of things. First of all, his ability to carry the ball. I think that's really important, especially when you're trying to manage games, to have somebody that you can give the ball to and know that they will carry it up the pitch. I think Grealish is very capable of that as well. But I think that's really important. But also his movement, I thought, created spaces for others on a regular basis. Now, I don't watch the Bundesliga every single week, but there was a period, if you cast your minds back to when football came to a massive standstill because of obviously the coronavirus pandemic, the Bundesliga was the first league to come back, wasn't it? And I was very lucky at the time because I was going through a period of about 2 or 3 months with no work whatsoever, like literally nothing. And it wasn't long after I'd kind of made the jump from a stable, solid job into the football world. And I was shitting bricks. I got a family, I got a mortgage to pay. I got, what was I going to do? And then this really good opportunity came along for me with Total Football Analysis to work on their Bundesliga coverage. And that was the first time for me that I'd watched Jadon Sancho week in, week out over a sustained period of time. And one of the things that we used to talk a lot about in our analysis of Jadon Sancho's performances was his ability to use the half spaces and to occupy those half spaces and to drift into them to either cause problems for the opponent himself or create spaces for the fullbacks to bomb on. And he does both of those things brilliantly. Jadon Sancho can either carry the ball into those areas himself and wreak absolute havoc, as we know he's capable of, but he also creates space for those in the wide areas as well. And I think that That was key last night in giving England joy against a really, really, well set up, I'm going to say, Ukraine side, who played essentially without possession with a back five, and then, a 3-man kind of midfield screen in front of them. So, yeah, I thought that was really, really important. What else have we got? Let's move on. That's enough kind of England loving, because, it's still England and there's still a good chance that they're going to let everybody down come the end of it. But as I said earlier on in the program, I'm starting to get my head around the idea that it might be coming home. Let's move on to some of the other quarterfinals, and let's start with the game between Switzerland and Spain. Switzerland getting off to the worst possible start with an own goal from, lo and behold, Granit Xhaka's replacement, Denis Zakaria, who deflected Jordi Alba's shot in past Jan Sommer, and Spain got off to a really, really good start. But credit to the Swiss again, right? Because they had a few problems going into that game. Obviously, no Granit Xhaka. They lost Brill and Bolo quite early on in the game due to injury. That obviously Freuler was sent off later on in the game. But the Swiss really have shown themselves to be a lot better side than I thought going into this competition. They've shown a grit, a determination, a resilience. And Xherdan Shaqiri's goal, just around about 22 minutes from full time, forced the game to extra time and then to penalty shootouts. And Switzerland will be bitterly disappointed that they went out. But I think that Spain were actually quite fortunate on the day, because I didn't think they were that good, and I didn't think they were anything like the side we saw against Croatia or the side that we saw against Slovakia. They've got fantastic players, Spain, as well, but you just get the feeling that they're a little bit vulnerable. And I think there was a real opportunity for Switzerland to put them to the sword when the penalty shootout came along. I can't understand for the life of me why Switzerland send all their centre-backs up to take penalties. I don't get it. And then, Fabian Schär's penalty, horrible penalty kick. And then Akanji's penalty. First of all, your centre-halves, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but you cannot be running up to penalties in penalty shootouts, trying elaborate little fucking skips in your run-ups and trying to outwit the goalkeeper. Put your foot through it, pick where you're going to go, put your foot through it, and take a professional penalty. And then, of course, I think it was Vargas who put the other one over the crossbar. That one, it was poor as well. And at least the other two were on target, you're going to argue. But, at least he tried to hammer it in and kind of be a little bit safer in his approach. First of all, I don't understand why Switzerland's penalty takers all seemingly are centre-backs. And then secondly, I don't understand why those centre-backs felt sort of cocky and confident enough to do that. Spain had missed, I think, all three of their last penalties going into the shootout as well. So they would have gone into it quite nervous, and I think they did well to hold their nerve in the end, despite Sergio Busquets missing the opening one. But Spain progress. They are a better side than the Swiss, so you could argue that they probably deserve it overall, but they didn't half make hard work of it. And then the second game on Friday night was an excellent game. What a game of football this was. Belgium 1, Italy 2. And as you guys will know, I'm a massive fan of the Italian side. I've really enjoyed watching them at this competition. For me, there's a little bit added to it because I am a big Serie A man and I do a lot of work on Serie A. And so seeing a lot of the players that I kind of rant and rave about and try to tell people about, producing it on the European stage for everybody to see it. There's something satisfying about that. When you've been banging the Barella drum, the Locatelli drum, the Chiesa drum, and then those guys turn up on the European stage and prove themselves, then you do feel good about it. Italy went into a 2-goal lead. They had a goal chalked off actually prior to that. Right decision, but a really good goal from Nicolo Barella just after half an hour to put Italy in front, and then a brilliant finish from Lorenzo Insigne to double their lead, where he just come in off that left-hand side as he does so frequently and bent one into the far corner. And Italy at that point were in cruise control. They were in a really strong position and they were headed for the semi-finals, and it looked as though they were going to do it without even breaking a sweat. But right on the stroke of half-time, Belgium were awarded a penalty that I didn't actually think was a penalty. I thought it was really soft. I thought the player almost leaned into the attacker rather than actually committing a foul. I was saying to my mates that I was watching it with, if there's a tangle of legs there in his attempt to get the ball, then I think it's absolutely a penalty, because he is preventing him essentially progressing. But for me, he kind of just leans into him and just tries to usher him out of the way. And you see that all the time in football. And in years gone by, there's no doubt in my mind that would have been sort of overlooked, and the referee would have waved play on quite emphatically. And I still think that, that just about isn't a penalty for me anyway. I know there'll be debate about that, but nonetheless, Lukaku stepped up. Obviously, Lukaku plays his football in Italy, and that adds a little bit of a extra spice to it. Put it in the back of the net, brought Belgium back into the game, but Italy were defensively brilliant. And they did a really, really good job. Donnarumma in goal. Chiellini returned to the side. He played alongside Bonucci. And Italy for me were really, really good. The game was managed really well by Roberto Mancini. I thought you saw those kind of characteristics that we've seen from Italian sides over the years. And when I say that, I'm talking about the gamesmanship and the sort of, being streetwise. But what I think what I tweeted immediately after the game was, this Italy side, unlike Italy sides before them, are not just streetwise, but they're brilliant at the same time. So they're as brilliant as they are streetwise, and that makes them a complete side for me. And I really, really have enjoyed watching them. He started to make changes, quite late on in the game. Mancini left it till around about the 75th minute. Cristante came on to replace Verratti. And then Berardi came on for Insigne, and you started to look at it and you were saying, well, Roberto Mancini now is managing this game in such a way that if Belgium do find the equaliser, then Italy are in trouble, because he had to make a decision. He had to go either down the route of protecting what he had and do that with all of his heart, or sort of, just stick it. He had to do that. He had to make that decision. He had to say, if I'm going to make changes now, I have to go one way or the other, and I have to do it with all my heart. I have to do it with all my sort of hope and belief that we can hold on to this, because had the game gone to extra time, I don't think the side that finished the game for Italy would have been capable of getting over the line, is my honest opinion. So that's what the point I was trying to put across there. He had to do what he did, but I think he did it knowing full well that if they didn't manage to hold on until the 90th minute or until the end of normal time, they'd have been basically screwed. Obviously, the biggest blow to Italy off the back of this was the injury to Spinazzola, who's been one of the standout players in the tournament. He's been very, very good, very impressive. I think Italy are going to miss Spinazzola in an attacking sense when they take on Spain in the semi-final. Do I think that they can cope with him without him defensively, though? I do, because I don't think that Spinazzola is the greatest defender, but he is incredibly effective going forward, and I don't know how they're going to replicate that. Emerson was the man who came on, the Chelsea fullback. Is he the answer? Not really blessed with a great deal of options at left back, but I think Emerson probably comes in, and I just wonder if he can bring you that same level of quality going forward. Moving on, we've touched on England already, and the other game yesterday was, of course, Denmark. They defeated the Czech Republic by 2-1, and it was a very similar story, actually, to the one between Belgium and Italy, where Denmark raced into this lead, looked incredibly comfortable, started... Czech Republic started the second half very well, and you wondered if they were going to hold on, but again, managed the game excellently. Thomas Delaney with a goal after 5 minutes, completely free-headed. Terrible defending that was, to allow him to pop up on the edge of the 6-yard box, completely unmarked, completely unchallenged, and head home. And then, of course, Kasper Dolberg, who's been brilliant in this tournament as well, popped up with the second goal. Brilliant finish, but the shout out for that goal has to go to Mæhle, the right-footed left wing-back who bombed down the side and whipped in a beautiful ball with the outside of his right boot, literally put it onto Kasper Dolberg's foot, and he just had to guide it into the back of the net. So really good stuff from the Danes as well. So the semi-final lineup is as follows. On Tuesday, Spain meet Italy, and on Wednesday, England meet Denmark. So lots to look forward to. Those games, as I say, taking place Tuesday and Wednesday. And then, of course, the final of the competition is next Sunday. So it's coming towards its conclusion. It's been a brilliant tournament so far, and we'll review the tournament when it is eventually over. Let's say a big hello to those of you watching us in the live chat right now. I can see there are plenty of you. If you've got any questions, drop them in the chat and I'll pick up a couple before we wrap up. Let's just quickly check in where we are in terms of likes. If you haven't done so already, please do hit the like button. It does really, really help as we look to grow the channel and push forward with it. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe as well. We'd like to get to 14,000 sooner rather than later. The one thing I want to say that isn't football related, and I think that I have to, well, I absolutely should say it, and I just want to say a big sort of sending love over to Cyprus, where obviously the country that I'm originally from, the country from which my family come, because there have been some really horrible forest fires over the last 24 hours that have seen people lose their lives, that have seen villages and towns literally burnt down, that have seen people's land completely burnt out. People who had spent years building houses have seen their houses burned down to a crisp almost. And unfortunately in Cyprus, and I know forest fires are not a problem exclusive to Cyprus. I know it's something that, all around the world is an issue. And, often people don't, or we don't have the resources to deal with this kind of thing. And Cyprus certainly don't have the resources to deal with something like that. But the most concerning thing about that is that it appears that those fires were started by somebody. And I don't know if it was to gain, because we've heard stories in the past of people trying to buy land and then not being able to strike a deal and then going and burning the land so that it becomes worthless essentially, and forcing that person into selling. We don't know that that's the case, but there is a strong suspicion that it was started by an arsonist, and there have been arrests made. But I know this is a football show, but for me, it's one that's hit home, obviously, for obvious reasons. And just sort of watching the news this morning from Cyprus and seeing people sort of looking at their burnt down houses and wondering what it is they're going to do next and how they're going to bounce back from this. I think it was, I know it was heartbreaking to watch. So sending love over to there, because I know that there are lots of you that watch this and listen to this that are based in Cyprus, because I get messages from you guys all the time saying, when are you coming over? When are you coming over? So sending love over to Cyprus, of course. And I know it's not really a consolation for those people that, have lost everything in these fires. But if you got your health, that's the number one, right? And I know it doesn't make it feel any better, but that is the reality. The health obviously comes first and is the most important. Right, let's go over to the live chat box. Let's pick up a couple of questions. Nishith says, did you feel Italy tried hard the last 10 minutes to waste time? Absolutely. That is what Italy have been renowned for, and that's why I talk about Italy being this time around as streetwise, as brilliant as they are streetwise. They're always streetwise, but this time they've shown a different side to their game as well, which is encouraging to see, without losing what it was that gave them the edge in so many years gone by. What's up, says Jorginho, man of the tournament. I tell you what, Jorginho is up there with some of the best performers at the tournament. I've always sort of backed Jorginho. I remember when he first signed for Chelsea, I remember sitting on the 90 Min show and having sort of debates with Chelsea fans who were telling me that, he was the problem, and that Maurizio Sarri bringing him in was a horrible move, and that the pair of them together were Chelsea's biggest issue. And actually, I think that he is. I think he's a fantastic player. I talk a lot about midfield metronomes, midfield tempo setters. If you're asking me who I would point to as the example of that type of player, that's who I'd point to, because I think he does that job brilliantly. He's not someone you look at and go, he's 6 foot tall, he's really quick, he gets across the ground and he protects the defense and the back line that way. He does it in a different way, but an equally effective way. And yeah, I'm a massive fan of Jorginho. I think he's definitely in the top 3 performers at the tournament, and hopefully he gets the credit that he deserves, even if he is a Chelsea lad. Big thank you to everybody sort of wishing Cyprus well in the chat as too. Thank you so much. Peter says, Harry, do you think Saka should start in the next game? I think Saka did enough in his 2 appearances so far to show that he's up for consideration. But I think we've kind of got drawn into this thing throughout the tournament where we've gone, oh, Southgate should do this, or Southgate should do that, or Southgate has to do this, or he has to do that. Actually, I think you just got to trust Gareth Southgate to make the right selection decisions for the right opponents. And up until now, he's done that perfectly. Do I think he should start? I don't personally think that right now Saka is, I don't want to say this in a way that comes across like I'm being an arsehole about an Arsenal player, because I'm not. I do rate Bukayo Saka. I rate him very highly, but I don't think right now Bukayo Saka gives you more in an attacking sense than Jadon Sancho. But I do think Bukayo Saka gives you more in terms of the overall shape of the team and being able to tuck into spaces and having that extra defensive awareness that has obviously been instilled in him with him having played in a variety of different positions. So I think it depends on your game plan. It would be my answer. It sounds like a politician's answer, but I genuinely do think it depends on how you want to play and what it is you're looking to achieve from the game. Big hello to Joe, who says, big up to you, the real Harry. Quick thoughts on Locatelli and Doku. Massive fan of Locatelli. Talked about him so much on the podcast the last few days. We're not going to get too deep into that one. But Doku looked a really exciting player, didn't he? Still looks a little bit raw to me. In terms of that end product, but incredibly powerful runner, very skillful, very technical, and caused Italy all sorts of problems. I'm sure he's a player for the future. There's no doubt about that. Russ Morgan says, do you think England can beat Italy in the final if that's the 2 teams involved? I think they can beat Italy in the final. Would I bet on them beating Italy in the final, though? Right now, I'm not 100% sure. And the reason I say that is not because I don't think England have good players. I've spent most of this podcast praising England, which a lot of people accuse me of not really doing. And listen, I class myself as a British Cypriot, right? That's how I class myself. Now, if England do well, it's great for the country. I've got no problem with that. But I am a little bit more detached from England than everybody else, or than a lot of other people. And I think that actually puts me in a position to be able to look at them for what they actually are at times and not get carried away by the hype and not get dragged into the frenzy that comes with England progressing in major tournaments. So looking at it objectively, I do think Italy have a little bit more in certain areas of the pitch. And those areas could prove key and could prove pivotal. There are areas, however, where I feel England have more. So I feel England have more in terms of a centre forward. I think that Harry Kane can do more for you. Harry Kane on song, especially now he scored a couple of goals, is a bigger threat than Ciro Immobile, for example. I think that Raheem Sterling can be a bigger threat than Lorenzo Insigne. I think that Federico Chiesa can be a very useful player, but I think Berardi is not quite always at that level. But then I move into the midfield and I would pick Jorginho, Verratti and Barella over Calvin Phillips and Declan Rice any day of the week. So that's the point I'm making here. I think there is different teams have different strengths. I think Italy have a really top manager in Roberto Mancini, and I think where Gareth Southgate has managed to get the better of some of his counterparts so far, I think that'd be harder to do against the Italians. And a manager in Mancini who's not just a very astute coach and who's not just been very successful in Italy, but who understands the English game and understands the English values as well, because of course he worked here. He worked at Manchester City. So I think it would be a really, really tough one to call. I would just, based on what we've seen at the tournament so far, where I do believe Italy have been the best team overall, I do feel that they probably have a slight edge. So I'd give them the 60-40 sort of in terms of percentage advantage over England if the 2 were to meet. But it's not going to be a foregone conclusion by any stretch of the imagination. And it's not a game that England can't win. Of course they can. But that's my take on it. Right, going to leave it there. Big thank you to everybody who's tuned in. Really, really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Apologies if I missed your questions, but I will pick some more up on the next show, and we'll be back tomorrow with a couple of podcasts to come your way. We'll be switching the focus back to Arsenal, and we'll be looking ahead to the Euro semi-finals a little bit too. So lots coming your way over the next 24 hours. Subscribe, like, share, join up as a member if you'd like to. And if you are listening via the audio platforms, do not hesitate to leave us a 5, nothing less, star review. I'll catch you all very soon. Until next time, take care.
You're listening to the Chronicles of Aguna, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.